What's up, everybody? Welcome to a new episode of Nobody Asked Us with Des and Kara, presented by Brooks Running. Woo!
Party music!
Pew, 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 pew.
I love it. Good job. Good job.
Okay, so we are super excited to chat today. We are also both emotionally exhausted from the conversations surrounding the Chicago Marathon, which this will entirely be about. That's what we're going to talk about today, is the Chicago Marathon. But we are both like, ugh, we got to do this, right? There's just been a lot of chatter. We're going to dive into it. Somebody wrote a message on my Instagram that said, I love that you and Des talk about stuff that no one else wants to talk about. So we're going there today.
This is, it's a bit of a vent session. We're kind of on a roll, right?
We are on a roll. I'm glad we waited. I'm glad we didn't just knee-jerk react and put out an episode. I'm glad we waited and were able to think on it and kind of see the fallout from it. But let's talk about, since we just had Brooks running, why don't we talk about some Brooks athletes that absolutely crushed the Chicago Marathon?
I think we have to go into that from the top. It's the good news. It's the best news. Across the board, I feel like Brooks athletes just showed up and delivered. Obviously, top American Susanna Sullivan, CJ Albertson, 2 big PBs, and Kara, they were both at our show like right before.
I feel like we're good luck, right?
Yeah.
I mean, CJ actually came on stage with us. Susanna was there, hung out with us afterwards, which I thought was really cool. I mean, they're just hanging out. I'm like, don't you guys want to like have your feet up and not be here? But they came and supported the pod, which was so cool, and then went out and just destroyed it on the roads.
I mean, I think when you see athletes like that who are getting ready for the biggest thing on their calendar for the rest of the year, and they're like, I'm going to go and do this fun event. Like, to me, it just said they're in a good headspace. Like, this is light. I'm not stressed. I'm not overthinking anything. CJ came up on stage. He was like, hey, it's my birthday. Everyone's saying happy birthday. Then he was like, how embarrassing. Like, come on, you loved it. It was super fun, though. And then, Susanna's hanging out afterwards, and she was like, hey, let's meet at 6:40 and run tomorrow. So I dragged my ass out of bed and ran with her and Nate from TCS. And, like people the day before the race, okay, a night before, like that far out, you're like, well, maybe it's just like they haven't lost their shit yet. And they're going to get real tense soon. But the next morning she was up and she was like, I want to run about 4. And we were at the 3.5 mile mark, and we're like, well, this is an out and back situation. So, but she's like, I'll figure it out. Like, she's like, I'll see you guys later. I'll figure it out. And we're like, why don't you just call a car? And she's like, nah, I'm just going to jog. Like, everything was super light. She was just having fun. And I was like, oh, she's just going to go out there and swing and see what happens. And
okay,
and
wait, I got to pause because I also went running after you, but I have 2 questions. I went running right after you, but I purposely avoided you guys because when I asked Susanna how fast she was going to run, she was like, oh, like 6:40 pace. I was like, yeah, okay, so that's my race pace now. So I'm not going to go with you guys. So A, was she just flying?
Yeah, like I need a good 1.5 miles these days to warm up. And like, that's like 7:50, maybe on a hot day, 7:30. Luckily, like there's some stop signs here and there, but I was like, oh, fuck, like just sprinting. And I think that's the fastest first mile. And in fairness, they did have the mile warm up.
They warmed up to get to you.
Yeah, so I was screwed. But that's the fastest first mile I've run in a very long time. And like, they didn't ever slow down. It wasn't like we settled in. Like,
is like so reassuring that I made the right choice to avoid you guys. But then my second question was, my run was awesome, but I got stopped so much. Did you guys get stopped by people the whole time?
No, because we were flying. They were like, well, they're running. Like, they're out there kicking ass. Can't stop
right.
them.
I'm just like running at 8:30.
Can't stop, won't stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, people I'm sure like, well, I'm going to jump in and run a few miles with Kara. And then you're like,
yeah, well, I only ran 4 miles, but a lot of people, like I totally blanked on the fact that you know me a little bit by now, that I get lost really easy. So I studied the map. I was like, I'm going straight down this street. I'm going to hit the water. I'll take a right. I'll run up the water till I hit 2 miles and I'll turn around and come back. I forgot that I had to cross the race. So that was like my first thing where people were hopping out of the race to get a picture with me. And I was wow, guys. you should just be like, how are you even noticing me here? Just standing. And then once I finally did get down by the river, same thing. So a lot of excitement. And I just was like, wow, I'm going to have to ask Des about how she survived her run, because so much excitement and so many people excited to see me out there. And I thought Des probably barely was able to run.
We went out and went to the left and like avoided
Ah,
the race completely. So I think that was a big saving piece. I don't know. And then
yeah.
like generally, people don't bug me.
Yeah, they do. You're a liar. I've been with you. Okay, so you guys ran and she was super chill.
Yeah.
And then she just destroyed the marathon on Sunday.
Well, she's coming back from this crazy injury. Like she made the world championship team and then fractured her kneecap. And like you
Yeah.
go to her socials, her Instagram. She has like reposted a bunch of stuff or like collab posted, and she tells this whole story, which is it's going to be better than when I tell it. But she had a fractured kneecap, so I feel like she's been on the comeback for a long time, just because that's clearly going to take a while. But man, like nobody trains as hard as her. Obviously, like you do your regular workouts and like they're all pretty comparable. And then she's like, yeah, but I do like 10 hours in the pool. And I'm like, that's insane. And she's like talking about her taper, and her coach was like, well, just stay doing 10 hours in the pool because it's not really that stressful anyways. And she's like, no, coach, like when I'm in the pool, like I'm working out. It's not like I'm just floating. Or
Right.
like,
Is she
like
swimming or is she aqua jogging?
I think she aqua jogs. So
Okay.
she's like, I tapered it a little bit, but like, she's like, I do an extra 10 hours like hard in the pool. Like those are sessions. I'm like,
Yeah.
so she, obviously super fit, and it was great to see her bounce back from such a long injury. But she told me, she was like, I think I'm going to go out in 70, maybe 110, 30. And I was like, oh, that's rich for having not completed a marathon in a long time. Right. And then her last marathon, I believe, is world championships. And it like went pretty poorly. Like I would have been tentative. And it was like, I don't know. We'll just see. I don't know what the pace group is yet, but that's what I think I'm going to do. And she did it. And like, I just think that mentality of like, I'm not so rigid or like so attached to any one thing, or like she had this like range of like, just gonna go and take some chances and see what happens. And like, I think that headspace was great.
Well, I loved it. She was out like I think within 20 seconds of her PR in the half, and I was like, "Ooh, that's a lot." But she every time you saw her, she was looking amazing, and she slowed down a little in the second half, but not that much. I mean, she had a big PR. She ran 2:21 high, and I agree. Sometimes you just got to take those swings. Like obviously she was ready, right? She was like we talked about that the night of our live pod. Like sometimes you can just take those risks because the training has been there and it's the right time. And then other times the training hasn't been there, but obviously hers had been. I mean, it
Right.
was awesome. She just looked so great when she was coming in. We could talk. I don't know if we'll have time to talk about the broadcast, but that's another thing we could talk about. But we did get to see her coming in, and she just looked so happy and so on top of it, right? Like she wasn't rigging in, like, oh God, this I
Right.
was over my head. Now I'm just hanging on, hanging on. I saw, they kept going back to her, and she's looking at her watch a lot. I think probably like, hey,
Can
you're
I get
doing
under?
this.
Can
You're
I get
doing
under?
this. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No one wants to
Don't
be
give up. Don't give up.
22
Oh,
to
two.
05 or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah. Like,
exactly. So it was, I mean, a hell of a race out of her. Super, super great.
yeah. Super fun. And CJ as well, like same thing. I thought that half split was aggressive, but I feel like we talked about it in the live pod as well, where he's had all these different races and he's like tried different strategies. And I think he knows himself as a marathoner so well that you could almost see him have that moment where he's like, this is too rich. I'm having a good one, but it could all go sideways if I stay in this space a little too long. So he almost like preserved himself to have a good finish and then like try and chase down that whatever the goal was. But like you could see in the middle where he was like tentative. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that he can get better at that. Like, right? Like when he gets up against that window next time, like maybe he goes another mile or two, preserves and then closes. And then he can stretch that, like I think there's ways to get better at that hard section. But I think he needed that breakthrough day and he got it. But
Mm-hmm.
there's still room for him to make some tweaks, which is
All
cool.
all I could think about was how a year ago Connor Mance ran 207, I want to say 43 or something like that, and Clayton Young ran 208 flat, I think, and what
Mhm.
CJ ran 208 13,
Is that
something
what it
like that.
was?
all
Yeah.
I kept thinking was CJ has officially moved to the next group.
Mhm.
And now I'm excited
Mhm.
to see him go and run with that next group,
Yeah.
right? Like imagine if Connor and Clayton, now granted, I'm assuming that they believe they're a year further ahead in fitness, but last year the race had great conditions. And I'm just thinking now he can go with them. I mean, imagine if he was in that, if they were there and he could see them up ahead, would he have been able to find even more time? Who knows?
Right.
But I just felt like, we talked a lot about this too, we talked a lot about it backstage, but sometimes you have to just make the next step. And then that puts you in the position to the next time really go for something big. And
Yeah.
CJ hadn't broken 210 until this year, where he broke it at Boston, but he knew it was there. And now he took a little bit of a risk, but also, as you said, like made smart decisions during the race. Now he's a low 208 guy. Now it's like, okay, now it's time to like go in there with the big dogs and know that you deserve to be with them,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was cool to see him put that together, and he messaged right away and he was like, "So how'd the bet shake out?" And I was like, "Look, you're never gonna know what the picks were. I
Yeah.
did I did
Everyone thinks that you picked him and I didn't, by the way. That's what people are saying on social. And
we're
I just want
never
everyone to know we're
no,
never going to tell, but we both picked the same person.
we're never gonna tell." But I told him, I said, I underestimated your time." That's what
Yes,
I
we
said.
both did.
And I owned that. I
Yeah,
will own that. The rest of it stays in the vault.
stays in the vault. I also underestimated his time, but not as much
Yeah.
as you did. So,
No, what was your time pick? You were like in the 209s, weren't you?
no, I was 208.50 something.
I was 208 like 23.
Okay, so you were closer.
Yeah. Sorry, I thought
Yeah.
you were saying got it. Okay.
No, I'm saying you won that part.
All right. No, I thought you were saying that I underestimated him more,
No, no,
like
no,
as
I
in
did.
like I
I did.
okay, okay.
Because
Look.
I was hung up on what Connor and Clayton did and what a
Yeah,
big
yeah.
day that was a year ago. And I just thought, like, that was such a huge day. And now we're all thinking that Zach and
Like this
CJ are
is
going to
going to
run
be a
suit.
regular
Yeah.
occurrence.
And I was
Right.
like, and then I was wrong.
No,
I'll say it.
it's fair. But I think we have to get a hat tip to Zach too, who went out
Yes.
and was like, "No, I'm ready to run this time. I can go out and 63:30, and I'm going to make it stick." And that's like after having his last race kind of unravel in those last 4 miles. He's he's taking chances, he's getting better at it. And it is the thing, like, do you step back and go like, let's just try to run 208 low, and then if you can sneak under, awesome, but like you're not gonna you got to do it the other way, like try
Yeah.
to run it in hard and close those last few miles. But and this is going to get us to the next thing, which we'll obviously get into, but they're it's not running the same as it has in the past. Like the marathon
No.
does not run the same. And you know what, like this is not a like anything new. Ruth Chepngetich, every time she races, her strategy is be the person who goes out hard and dies the least.
Yep.
And then she got better at it.
Yep.
So there's value in that too. Like it's just which way Zach wants to adjust. Like he can get better at the fade,
Mm-hmm.
like that's a tactic too.
Yep.
And now we've seen it be successful. So
Right. Right.
but hats off to him for taking a chance, particularly after like the trials where you're like, I don't know. I don't know if I can swing that hard again. That was hard. Like those last few miles are hard. I don't want to feel like that again.
Yeah.
And he
And
wasn't afraid.
I think afterwards you found out that he had been dealing with a little injury too. And so I like that he called a shot, said he was ready to run fast and went out and just tried to do it, and it fell apart over the last 8K or whatever. But I agree. Like, I like that he went out there, wasn't afraid to go for it. And like you said, we're going to get into it, but people are falling apart less and less in the second half. The sport has completely changed. And that's just the way it's being run now.
Yeah. And look, everyone in the Brooks crew is wearing these fancy Hyperion Elite 4 with a little twist.
The little twist.
Little lemon twist on their different colorway. I don't know. Everyone ran really well. So maybe something's cooking on their feet.
That's right. That's right.
Stay tuned.
We were really only focusing on the Americans, which obviously we're going to take a shift in a second, but the rest of the American women didn't have the best day, right? I mean,
It's a
D'Amato,
mixed bag.
it was a
Yeah.
mixed bag. D'Amato ended up dropping out. McKenna Morley dropped out. Emma Bates, she admitted after that she had missed a bunch of time with training. Who am I forgetting?
You know who ran well? That
Who?
deserves her flowers
Oh,
is
Lindsay.
Lindsay Flanagan.
Yes.
She's like one of the most consistent
Yes.
racers and the most consistently underrated racers. She's always there. She always is like right in that mix. She rarely has a bad day. And she did it again. She just didn't get that like top American moment. So you're
Right.
like,
But she
oh
was second
wow.
American, right?
Yeah, right.
And she ran 203, I think, and 223. And such a
Tomato, tomato.
solid, 203, whatever. It's just sometime. She runs so solid. I feel like she's been around for a while now.
Yeah.
And that's why it's funny when people are like, oh yeah, Lindsay Flanagan. Like, yeah, no, she's been good for a long time. And you're right. She is always really solid, really reliable. She ran so well at World Champs last year.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really well. And so it's cool to see her come back and just keep plugging away. She just keeps plugging away. Yeah.
I wonder who will be interested in World Champs next year. Like obviously that was a big kind of standard chasing moment, rankings, all of that stuff. I think that it is fascinating that Susanna Sullivan and Lindsay were both on that team.
Yeah. For Budapest.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it will be interesting because World Champs is so late next year. It's in the second half of September. So if you do that, it really eliminates doing it eliminates it in our old world. Maybe now you could pull it off, but it seems like it eliminates, Berlin, Chicago, New York. So
Valencia.
It'll be interesting. Yeah, Valencia. Well, maybe you could still do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could do that and that. You could do December marathon for sure. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see who's interested. I think for a lot of those women, it's helpful to go and run at a championship and see what it's like, especially if you are really thinking about making that Olympic team. It's a chance for a dry run of what that might be like. And then you can focus the next 2 years on getting yourself ready to make the Olympic team. But
yeah,
we don't know what's going to happen.
Can I tell you a story about my travel home?
Yeah, please.
Because we're going to talk about watching the race. And I was on my phone watching it. I left at I think I had a 5:30 flight home from Chicago.
On Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm in the airport and then it's delayed an hour and I'm like, that's okay, no biggie. I have enough. I had a 1:00 flight and then I was going to meet with Garrett. So I was like, I will switch to the 5, but the 1:00 was direct. The 5:00 had a layover in Detroit. Fine, no biggie. So I get delayed and then it's getting pushed and pushed. And I'm like, we're sitting waiting. I'm like, Ryan, can you book me a hotel room at the Westin? Because there's no way I'm making this flight. So we land, I have the hotel. It's fine. No big deal. I get up in the morning, watch the race. I looked at the connection. They're like, you're on a 4 p.m. flight tomorrow to Detroit. I was like, you're fucking kidding me. I'm here this is an entire day. No biggie. I'll just do my run, watch the race, have a relaxing day at the stupid Westin. And then I was looking around and I was like, oh, there's there was a 9:00 and I was going to book it. And then I looked that it had a connection that I would have to go back through Chicago.
Oh my God.
But I woke up in the morning and got put on a 10 a.m. flight direct to Traverse City. So I was watching on my phone and then I had to turn it off while we were
I know, because I was so confused because you were like, oh, I'm going to miss the ending because I'm going to be on the plane. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Didn't you go home last night?
I tried. But the kicker was you could go back through Chicago. It's like,
no, thank you. I'm good. I'm so good. Thanks.
It's stupid. I should just stayed and watched the race.
Oh, that's what you get for changing to meet with Garrett.
I know.
I hope you had a good meeting with
Garrett. Never meet with Garrett. It was good. It was a great meeting. But oh well. Anyhow, so
that's a terrible travel story.
Yeah. So the broadcast was not my problem. I was watching the live tracking and sort of peeking in here and there as I navigated the airport. So you'll have to weigh in heavily on that.
Okay. Well, if we get to that, I think we need to just dive in. And as I told you over text, I think there's 3 really important components here, which is the time. What does that mean? Are we allowed to be skeptical of it? Shoe technology and how we have no idea what it's doing. And then the way it's been being reported. And I at first thought we would do this let's tackle each subject separately, but you were like, yeah, they're all going to bleed together. And you're right. They're all going to bleed together.
If it happens, it happens. But I like that you put this structure out there for us. Here for a structure.
Okay. So first, obviously, we're going to talk about, I mean, whatever. The men's winner was 202. Career, awesome race out of him. Wesley Square's brother, which is actually kind of fun and different, and awesome race out of him.
A6 athlete. That's cool.
A6 athlete. Yeah. Very cool. Now we'll talk about the women's race. Okay. I don't even know how to start this because I'm so irritated. Okay, 209.56 was the win. And that I think it's so hard, Des. I don't know how to start talking about this, but I know once we do, I'm going to be on a rampage.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, we saw the time. I saw the time. I was watching the broadcast, and I'm thinking, like, what just happened? A little deja vu, because that's how I felt a year ago when the world record was lowered to 211.53. So a little bit of deja vu of, like, what am I watching? What does this mean? Am I allowed to be skeptical of this time? And I think I'm just going to say, I think healthy skepticism is okay.
100%.
Right? I mean, like, the sport is constantly breaking our heart. We're constantly follow me on Twitter. There's bans on the daily, not daily, but weekly. And
Regularly,
I think it's okay to have skepticism. And I wrote all the reasons why I was skeptical, but I just want to hear your initial thoughts when you saw the time first.
I mean, it's just funny. Like, you know, like I just laugh. I'm like, that's fucking wild. But I'm not surprised anymore. Like, there's nothing that could happen in the sport that would surprise me, because 211.56 or whatever it was like the exact, like, and then I roll back and, like, Sifan looking like she's shattered and then putting herself back together again. And you're like, well, and then you have all these moments where you're like, I just didn't think that was possible. But I watched it and nothing's become of it that says that I shouldn't believe it. And now I'm not saying that you can't be critical or cynical or whatever. Like, there are things in the sport that are happening, but, like, nothing. There's all the metrics of what we're seeing, like, they're just different. And so I think once you take down the mindset of, like, no, it's supposed to look like this, it's supposed to look like this, it's supposed to look, and you just go, like, look, hey, this is a different sport. We're in a different world. Be open to the possibility that this is real.
Right.
Because, like, Ruth wouldn't even shoot for that in the old shoes, or, like, back in, you know what I mean? Like, that would have been suicide. But for some reason, she has an unlock that it's like, yeah, I don't care. I'm going to go out in 104.
Right.
And I don't care. And that's different sport. It's not the same. So the number is shocking, but it's like, I've been there before now. So it's like, well, okay, like, she just moved the bar. Is it going to move again? Or are we going to start seeing, like, boundaries? We haven't seen any boundaries yet.
No. And we don't know what we're watching. I think that's what we really want to get into today, is that we have no idea what we're watching. I do want to say there are reasons to be skeptical, and not just with Ruth. I mean, I was thinking about how everyone's losing their minds over this. Remember what we just saw at the Olympics? We saw someone win 2 medals on the track and then go win the marathon. And, right, like, we're seeing stuff that doesn't make sense for the way we imagine the sport is, which it's not anymore. The sport is totally different sport. So we're seeing stuff that doesn't make sense. I think, and we're going to get into this, I think what bugs me is comments like, this just broke the sport. This just killed our sport. This is the performance that, like, that is driving me fucking crazy, because we haven't seen some crazy shit for years and years and years. And I'm really annoyed that, like, I get it. Okay, I wrote down the reasons why I would be skeptical. I'm just going to read them.
Okay.
She PR'd, she said her 5K and 10K PR in the first 5 and 10K of the marathon. You know, according to the World Athletic, her profile, her PR in the 5K, I think was, I don't know if I wrote it down. I think it was like 1550 something, but she went through in 15 flat. I mean, okay, I'm just saying. I'm just going to say all the reasons that people are going to say it's skeptical. She went through in 15 minutes. She ran under her 10,000 meter PR and then kept going, right? Her first half was 64:16, which would be number 5 all time on the half marathon list, and only a few seconds off of her personal best in the half marathon. That is a red flag to me. Sorry, it is.
Yeah,
It's like
that one.
my PR is 66:57. There's no way in hell I was ever going in a marathon and going out in 67:01 or whatever, right? Okay. Her last race was 2:24, which a lot of people have brought this up, and they were like, that would be like Kiptum running 2:15 right before he ran 2 minutes. I do want to point out, like, people have off days.
It's allowed.
But, right now I'm on the negative side. So back to the negative stuff. People are arguing that she has always gone out super aggressive, which is true. I think that could be argued on either side the way you want to look at it. I called the 2021 Chicago Marathon, and they wrote down the splits because, like I said, this has been eating at me like you would not believe. Okay, so in 2021, she went out in 67:34, and our minds were blown during the broadcast. And I remember we were going to do a little thing on Chris Derrick because he was running. It was his marathon debut, and he's from the Chicago area. And they're running side by side. And we're like, what the hell is happening? Well, she ended up totally blowing up and coming back in 75:57. So almost 76 minutes for her second half. So almost 10 minutes slower. But she still hung on to win. But so anyway, she goes out. We've seen her race this way before is my point. Like, it's not like she tried this new strategy. She PR'd by 4 minutes and 22 seconds off a career which has already been super fast. She's been running very fast marathons since 2017. So to see this giant chop off of time is concerning, right? And then this one I know you're not as keen on, but her agent is Federica Rosa, who has had many, many positives, including the Olympic champion, including Rita Jeptu. So no, you can't just say because someone has an agent that you're doping, but there's been people in her camp have been associated with doping. And then her best half marathon this year was 65:50. Again, don't know the context, don't know if it was like during a heavy training week, but if her best marathon of the year is 65:50 and then she goes out in 64:16, it is a little like, wait, what? So those are all the things that if people say that, I'm like, I agree. And not to mention that there are a lot of positives from her country right now, right? There just are. It's uncomfortable, but it's true. There's over 100 Kenyan athletes suspended right now for doping offenses. So I think you put all those things out there and it's kind of like, yeah, I think it's okay to have healthy skepticism. The part that's hard for me is that we should be having healthy skepticism, and I feel like I do, about everything that we see. And this performance, it's like people have lost their fucking minds and they feel like they're allowed to just say whatever they want to say. And that's the part that for me has been really, really difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you're right on all of those. I think that there's probably a counter argument to every single one of those.
Right.
I don't have the time or the care to do it, but like I think about this, I'm like, well, yeah, but, and like I'm not sticking up for Chepngetich. I don't know her. It's not my job to stick my neck out for her, but I think that we've seen this dramatic shift in this sport, and now like this, like you said, this one broke our brains, and it's like, why? Like,
right.
And we're going to get to the point where we're on the same page here, and it's like we started this podcast as the old bitter bitchy grumpy washed up women because we're like, this isn't fucking real, this isn't fucking real, this isn't fucking real. And like people were like, you're just jealous, you're just bitter, you're just, and like because those things were breaking our brain where you're like, this isn't. And we watched the sport change dramatically. And all of those things that we contributed to the record books, whether they're big or small, like are not a huge deal, but it was like they were meaningful to us and we understood where we were in context to the history and like it was meaningful. And as all that got washed away while we were being bitter and jealous, it was like we coped. We're like, okay, like you're right. Like I got to reframe, I've got to adjust. So I don't know, like it just feels like now it broke your brain the way it did ours back then. And I'm going to take the time to remind you that maybe you're just being bitter and jealous because the sport has moved on. Get rid of your old ideas. Everything you thought is gone. It's a different sport. Don't be bitter and jealous because your records are gone now or your times look inferior now. Just watch it and wait and see if there is a positive and wait for some metrics to start falling on the board so that we can make real decisions because we don't have enough information right now to make real decisions.
I think this is so important. People think that you and I are just the fucking most negative, bitter bitches out there about shoe tech. We both worried about this. I got in so many fights on Twitter in 2018 saying, fine, we're okay with shoe tech, but what is this going to do long term? It's going to make everything better. Why do you suck so hard? Da, 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 da. This is the shit I was worried about.
Right.
This has been coming. And I'm like you. I swallowed my pride. I said, everything I did now is insignificant. I'm not on any list anymore. It's like nothing happened. I mean, to be fair, I was podiuming, but none of that shit matters anymore. I was slow. I was a turtle compared to how they're running now. My coach, when we found out about shoe tech, my coach wrote to World Athletics. It was then IAAF. And he just said, hey, so we've agreed, the very first super shoe had an average of 4% energy return. That doesn't mean 4% off your time. It's about 2/3 of that. The average was 4% on the first super shoe, right? So some people were getting up to 8%. Some people were getting 1%. The average was 4%. My coach said, so we're okay with 4%, improvement. Are we okay with 6%? Are we okay with 8, 10? Where's the line where we say, hey, this is out of control? And they were like, hey, we are moving forward and embracing technology. And I had to accept that. And you had to accept that. But in the back of my mind, I was always like, the sport is no longer the same. That was in 2018. It's 2024. 6 years have gone by. The shoes have only gotten better. When they first came out, people just raced in them. And you could kind of see it on the track, like about a second to a second and a half per lap. And you would see people go out and run these 15-second PRs in the 5,000. You'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. You'd see people go out and PR in the 15 and 5 seconds. And you'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. But now it's just a fucking different sport. You can train in them, right? All of your workouts are faster because you can train in them. Then you can recover faster because the shoes help you recover better. And so it was only a matter of a time before what we thought was a good time it's obsolete. And right. I feel frustrated that I'm like, no shit, this was going to happen. Like,
yeah, we weren't being bitter, jealous, and old. We were just trying to point you down the line, like look ahead to the future. That's right. What we're trying to say.
That's what we're saying. Like, what is our
record? It's like, no, what is
right? Oh, you just care because you're not on an all-time list anymore. No, I'm saying like at some point this is going to get out of control, and then what? And I feel like that's where we're getting to. And it's really frustrating, right? It's so frustrating. We don't have enough information. We don't know what the shoes are doing. If someone says to me, shoe benefit is minimal, I'm going to like rip my hair out because it goes to everything. Our world championship standards. You're telling me people just got that much better in the last 6 years because what they discovered double threshold or something? Like, give me a break. That's actually insulting, right? I'm not saying these athletes aren't working their asses off. Of course they are. But it's not the same sport. 15 minutes in the 5K when I was running was like a huge barrier for women. Now it is not a thing. It's just changed so much, and people, they want to see the fast times, but they're still comparing it to when they were younger or when they raced. And that's why they just cannot accept this time. They just can't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when the shoe stuff started out, initially it was like, this is mechanical doping.
Right.
So if you refer to it in that way, like, yeah, it makes sense. Well, it's the doping. Sure, mechanical. And don't get me wrong, like, there is absolutely doping going on in this sport.
Right, and we're not dumb.
But here's what is kind of funny is like, okay, here's the long list of athletes from Kenya who have tested positive. Is Ruth Chepngetich not good enough to be tested?
Right.
Like, okay, here's the people who did test positive. Is she on that list yet? They're certainly got to be testing her if they're testing these folks. And again, I'm not saying that it's going to go either way in the future, but obviously she runs Chicago. She's going to get tested. She runs that world record. She's going to be on a lot more radars wherever she goes and races. In competition, out of competition, that's a whole different conversation. But look, we celebrated Kipchoge's sub 2 that was done in a lab, and it was this massive thing. And I don't remember seeing any articles or any like feedback like this. Was there any testing at that event? Because Ruth got tested in Chicago.
Right. I think that's there's so many things that are bugging me about this whole thing. And again, I want to acknowledge that healthy skepticism I think it's okay. I think as a fan of the sport, we should have that. But there's so many things about this that are bothering me. And I think The Kipchoge example is really, really perfect because that is seen as a breakthrough for mankind. Okay, weird, but all right. But a woman doing something equivalent to that, or perhaps better than that, is seen as breaking the sport, ruining the sport.
Yeah.
And I'm having a really, I mean, I'm just going to go there. This is going to be our third point, but I'm having a really, really hard time with how the media is portraying this. And people are going to be like, not everything is about sexism, but I feel like this is. What would it take for a man to run before we go, whoa, 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 that just broke our brains. That just ruined the sport. I don't hear anyone saying that. I think about a lot of things. I think about Flojo, who was one of my idols growing up. It's widely discussed now that she was doping. That's fine. I can get behind that. I've read enough. But Bolt saved the sport. I'm having a really hard time right now with 209.56 breaking the sport and too flat from a runner we didn't really know that much about in his first year of marathoning being the next great god of marathoning. I'm like just really struggling with that. I'm going to let you step in because I might say something I regret. So
No, I think you're on point, and I think that that's very fair. I think sub 210 is a number a lot of men can wrap their mind around, and they can see their own heroes maybe get surpassed, or maybe, be fighting down the finishing stretch with Chepngetich, and that's uncomfortable.
I agree.
So
But what they don't realize is it's not the same sport. As when
exactly.
your heroes were running 210 or 209, it was not the sport that it is now. And that's what you and I were talking about 6-7 years ago when everyone said we were bitter and old and jealous.
I think what people need to do, go pick up Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind. Get yourself some mushrooms. Take a little bit of the mushrooms. Reset all the neurons in your brain that have this picture made about what the marathon looks like. Put down a fresh layer of brain snow, and then set new tracks. Because you've got two things going on right now. There's two different worlds. So you need to how to change your mind. Go get it. Get some mushrooms.
Okay,
Move on.
move on. It's just tough. It has me thinking about so much. Like this summer, Jakob Ingebrigtsen broke Daniel Komen's world record in the 3000, which had stood since 1996. And I was racing back in those days. And I mean, I raced after him, but he was talked about as like this god in a record that would never fall, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Ingebrigtsen breaks it by 3 seconds. And again, I don't care if you have healthy skepticism. I think that's good. I think you should be an educated fan. But I didn't see people writing, oh, this was it. That was the unbreakable record, right? I'm really having a hard time with it. And I did talk to a reporter a couple days ago, and he said, do you think there could be sexism behind this? And I was like, yes. And he was kind of stunned. But I just feel like if we really look at there have been plenty of male performances that were otherworldly. And I feel like the narrative is that that's groundbreaking. And I don't feel like women are being given the same grace. And I also just want to read this stat because I'm into this right now. Michael Bodine, whoever you are, thank you for putting this in. He said that the world record in 2003, when Paul Radcliffe set it at 2:15:25, that put it within 10 minutes of the men's world record, which ironically was Khalid Kanuchi, which is still our American record at 2:05:38. So it was within about 10 minutes. Paul Radcliffe is still number 6, where Khalid Kanuchi's time isn't even in the top 150. So there's an argument to be had of like, well, actually, women haven't progressed that much, right? I mean, there's so much I wonder. I wonder if super shoes give women more of an advantage because of the way our physiology is and our center of gravity. There's so much that we don't know. And I just think it's okay to be like, wow, that time doesn't make sense to me and I'm going to question it. But I feel like we just don't know what we're seeing.
Well, just don't take the cop out of like, well, it's drugs and it can't be anything else.
Right.
Because like I think Paula's race was such an outlier for so long that it wasn't something you would shoot for, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it was broken, and why can't women have a banister effect? All of a
Right.
sudden, oh, like this is completely opened up what we thought was possible. And now once it fell down, it was like, boom, let's go. And there's a little bit more history, there's a little bit more depth, and okay, like why can't there be a Bannister moment? Okay, so that's one thing. Two, like if you go to East Africa, you go to these group runs and these like fartlek runs, everyone goes out and you go out and you just hang with the leaders. That's what you do. You do as many reps as you can. And when you get dropped, you just jog home. It's not like you failed. You didn't screw up your workout. It wasn't a bad day. It was that's just the end of your day. And then you come back and you try again. You get a little bit better. You get a little better. So if you think that positive split is maybe now the way to run the race, maybe that's the perfect training. Maybe it's just adapting to something totally different. But the reality is there's no fear of failure. So that's a huge component. I mean, you can go on in different reasons that like this makes sense. And I don't know, like how is 211 any different? How is 213? Like, you know what I mean? Like I just,
What do you think a man would have to run for people to be like, that was too fast? Like, do you think if someone ran 158, people would say that was too fast? Because I don't.
I was going to say 157 or 156.
So, but my thing is like, so 156, people are like, nope. But what if someone ran 159, let's say over the next 4 years, it goes from 2 hours and whatever it is right now. I'm not sure.
Too low, right?
Hold on. I did write it down.
40.
2:35.
Okay, 2 minutes.
Okay,
yeah, so I mean that's the next logical step, right? Let's get
159. Then you have. I'm trying to. Everything has broken my brain since I found out about super shoes. So I'm trying to think of what time would actually break my brain anymore. I mean, we've seen a 14-minute 5K for women. We've seen sub 29 minutes. We've seen, Albertson running 7:17. So I'm just sort of like, what? I don't know what would break my brain anymore. I'm not saying that I don't wonder if there's something nefarious going on. Of course, I always wonder. Fucking trust me, I wonder. But I'm like, what would break my brain? Because I do believe that people have wildly underestimated the impact of shoe technology and what it has done to our sport and will continue to do to our sport.
I think that's the thing is that, and this is what I keep going back to. I was trying to find a good example. It's like getting a new bow, right? Like a bow and arrow, and you don't know what you're doing, you're just shooting off arrows and they're kind of all over the place. And then you figure out what you're doing and they start to group up, right? Mm-hmm. And then like they get closer and closer. You're like, oh, like I need to move my sight to the right. It needs to lift up. It needs to the right. Like, and then you can zone in and be like, okay, now like I can shoot and hit like they're going to mostly be together. You know what you're doing. You understand it. And then you add, 125 pounds of tension on the bow and arrow. And you're back to just shooting all over the place. It's not like you've changed, like it's just different. And then you have to regroup up and understand what you're doing with the bow. And then you can make sense of it again. It's like we added 125 pounds of tension on the event, but we want to like use the same sight. You can't do that. So like, we just need to wait. Everyone needs to pump the brakes on their feelings and wait until we start seeing some like things group up. And then when you have it, they're grouped up, we can start making sense of it. That's what I keep going back to, where I'm like, drugs didn't go away, but that's still like, and here's the other thing.
And
like,
there were drugs back when we were running too, by the way.
Maybe there's a mystery drug, which if it's not being tested for it, if it's not on the ban list, then you know what, like, what are you going to do until it's discovered and then put on the ban list? But we know what EPO, we've seen athletes on EPO. We've seen them run really fast and we've seen them get busted. They weren't running this fast.
Right.
And we're still like, we still don't have like when they did it, like everyone saw Rita's race and was like, that's ridiculous. Right. And there was no other explanation. It was like, dude, she just trounced the men over the last 4 miles. Like this just feels like crazy wrong. But we had the context. We had the men's that made sense. We had the women's that made sense. We had like, there's the outliers. Like,
I also think of Shubakova when she was in Chicago and ran her last 2 miles faster than the men too, right? Like we were like, there's all this context around it. Yeah.
Right. And I just don't feel like we have that or enough of that yet to like, I don't feel comfortable being like, nope, it's the drugs. Like, I don't understand it yet. I just don't understand it.
Well, and also I think it's okay to have skepticism, but I mean, I just won't say that I think someone's doping till I've either seen it or I've read the report, right? If I haven't seen it with my own eyes or read the report, I'm skeptical of a shit ton of athletes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. A lot of fucking people. But I'm
Yes.
not going to say it because I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. And I may be suspicious, but I don't know. And my job isn't to just start a rumor mill. My job is
Right.
to, I'm very passionate about clean sport. And when someone has tested positive, my job is to speak up and say they deserve the longest ban possible.
Lifetime
But
bans.
yeah. But other than that, like, unless I see you do it, or I've read the report where you admitted you did it, or you were caught or whatever, those are suspicions that I'm going to have. And maybe I'll chat about them with my friends, but I'm not going to go out there and pound my fist and say, I know they're doping, because I
You
don't.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. I don't know if you are. You don't know if I was.
It's
We
not
don't
how,
know.
it's not how it works.
Not
Right.
how it works.
The other thing too is that the moment you just say, well, it's doping, you make that thing unavailable for you, right? Like
Yeah.
I can't reach that goal because it's doping, so I give up. I'm just going to do my own thing over here, and I'm not even going to try to compete.
Yeah.
So if it's not doping, you've made it really hard on yourself to be able to compete because you don't believe you can. You believe that they're doing something wrong.
Absolutely. And even as a fan, once you've drawn that line, like, you don't think the sport's going to keep progressing forever.
Right.
Like, you actually think it's going to get to a point where, like, 209.56, no one will ever run faster than that. I promise you someone will.
Yeah.
And I think just like the 2 hours, 35 minutes, or Kipchoge's 1:59, whatever it was, like, those times are going to get broken. They just are. I mean, I think her being 11th overall, freaked people out. Maybe the men's race just wasn't as deep.
It wasn't. That was a conversation beforehand. That was like, hey, we're coming off the Olympics. Berlin was pretty unsensational in terms of the depth. Like, it's just hard to recruit for these races right now.
Right.
Right? Like, that's just what it is. And whatever. I mean, there's just so much depth as well that you can still put together a decent field. But also, if you're out of the money, or you're out of the top 5, or you're going to get reduced, like, you just walk home and try again another day. It's the same kind of like swing for the fences. Oh, it's not a bad day. I didn't lose anything. I'm just going to try again in Valencia.
Right. Okay. One thing that has really also bothered me, and this is not like about the time or sexist media. I'm like, what? I feel like other countries are making massive progress in the marathon, and I feel like the United States isn't. And I don't want to take away from what anyone's done, because our men and women, I know they're working hard, but I'm just like, wow, the US record is still from way back in the day on the men's side. On the women's side, our American record is fairly fresh. It's like a couple years old, but it's 8+ minutes now behind the world record. I just feel like we aren't having the same leaps as other people. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Top American and reduction clauses.
Oh, reduction clauses.
We do have something to lose, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not like just try again next week. Like, shit, I got reduced by 50%.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go hit halfway and make sure that I'm like, yeah, I've been there. You're like, I got to just consolidate here and make sure I get in under my, because I spent a lot of time on this and I would like to make my full paycheck and not just half of my paycheck.
Yeah.
Where, like, this is an interesting thing too with the agent conversation and Chepngetich and the Rosas is like a whole different conversation. But like, does she even know what her contract is? Does she know if she has a reduction? Probably not. They're like, just go run fast. She runs fast and they're like, let us know when you need money.
Right.
She doesn't, she probably has no grid for what she made. I would like to buy a home. Okay, we'll move some money for you.
Right.
She doesn't know what she made.
Right.
She should leave them. Like,
I think it's so complicated, right? Like, I am uncomfortable when an athlete's represented by Rosa, but I also don't live in that world.
I think
I don't live in that world. You
right?
take what you can get. This person comes in, their relationship. I mean, for some Kenyan athletes, sure, but not all Kenyan athletes have the relationship with their agents like we do in the United States. A lot of them are actually being used by agents. And so I am always uncomfortable when I find out an athlete's with Rosa, but I also, It's again, it's like trying to compare the times of the past to the times of today, comparing agents in the United States to that, like my experience with agents to that, they're not the same thing.
I'm uncomfortable when a coach is under investigation and athletes still decide to go with them.
Oh,
You
I
know?
mean, isn't that more alarming that the coach and that us sponsors continue to feed athletes to that coach? Yeah, I think
And
that's a
what
great
happens?
point.
And what happens? Like, look at your broadcast in Chicago, right? Look at your teams around the country. Who are they coached by? Look at the pieces in Runner's World about athletes who, you know, it. I don't like Ruth took what she could find. I'm sure.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, and I get it. Like once you have knowledge, maybe you try to separate. But how easy is that?
It's not.
It's not
That's the
easy.
hard part. I don't think it is that easy. Most athletes, their agents get all of the money. A lot of times they don't know exactly what their contract was. How much travel did I have? How much this did I have? Right? They actually don't always know. That happens here in the United States. So it's definitely happening over there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just feel like it's easy to say Rosa. And even I have found myself saying that because I really don't trust him.
I've done that too, and I still would like. I would still do it, but I
Right. I
try to
still
catch. I
think
try
that,
to
but
catch
I try
myself.
to say, hey, like, I try to remember that, like I said, we're comparing apples and oranges of the situation here. Okay. I want to ask you something. We didn't discuss it ahead of time, so it might catch you off
Okay.
guard. Robert Johnson from Let's Run at the podcast did ask Ruth, what would you say to people who are, I can't remember how he phrased it, but like suspicious of this result based on the positives out of Kenya? And there's a lot of discussion of whether that was appropriate or not. What did you think about that?
I don't mind the question. I don't love the timing,
Right.
but I don't mind the question. And like, when else are you going to ask it? So I mean, I get it. You take your opportunity. I think it's a fair question. I mean, I don't know. I think that was always coming, and maybe they should have media trained her for that question. She didn't answer it incredibly well. But I don't know. I mean, she's like on cloud nine. Like, I just
And
rather risk
maybe
my
there's
life
also a bit of a language barrier too, right?
for sure.
When I first heard about the question, my initial reaction was like, don't do that. Don't do that. But then I actually went and watched it. And I
Hmm.
felt like it was actually phrased it was not accusatory. I don't think.
Yeah.
I did not feel like it was accusatory. I felt like it was like, hey, there's going to be people that are skeptical. What
Yeah.
would you say to that? I really felt like it wasn't. I agree with the timing. It's, she's up there in front of the world, essentially, being asked about this incredible performance. So the timing, but I think it is a question that athletes should be prepared to answer and from everywhere. I will say I got asked that question all the time. How are we supposed to believe your results if you say your coach was doping people? And I had to fucking just take it and grin and bear it and answer it the best I could. So I don't think it's necessarily a terrible question. I also was like, oh God, just ask it later. But it
Yeah.
wasn't.
Right.
I think at this day and age, athletes need to be ready for something like that. All athletes need to be ready for a question like that. And it isn't necessarily always someone's trying to gotcha you.
Right.
It's
Right.
like, hey, this is blowing my mind. I'm having a hard time dealing with this. Like, what would you say to people who are like, there's no way that could be real? I don't know. I just think, but I wondered for her if it was maybe a little bit of a language barrier and perhaps it just really caught her off guard. I
It's
mean,
probably a combination. Like, I don't, yeah, I didn't watch any of the press conference, so I don't know how her answers were to anything else. And I'm sure you could kind of look at like, how in depth is she going? Are these pre-prepared? Like, I want to thank my sponsors and the race, and I had a most fun, and thank
right,
the Lord.
right.
And then they're like, what about doping? I would like to thank my sponsors and the race. And you're like, okay, like, she doesn't, this not quite ready for it. So I don't know, but
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with the question. I think it's fair. And I think in other sports after events, you're getting hard questions, whether the day goes good or bad. And we have to be prepared for those too.
Yeah, I agree. All right.
How do you feel about that? Did we get what we needed to out? I feel like I was much more calm than I anticipated.
I was way calmer than I thought I was going to be.
I've had a
So
lot of thoughts on my run. And like, look, I feel like I'm on here defending Chepngetich, and I don't know her. I'm not trying to defend anybody, and I'm not trying to say right, wrong, whatever. I'm just saying, as with many things, there's a lot of different sides to it, and it's just so, in my opinion, lazy to go, it's the doping. Hit pause, take a deep breath, and like get into all of the things that could be going on.
I agree. I feel like if you want to have a conversation about doping in our sport, I know you're struggling.
Like I'm in jail.
I feel like you need to move your camera so you can hide over there. I feel like if you want to have a conversation about doping, then let's have a real conversation about doping, because there's many, many performances we can talk about that are questionable. I don't think I'm shocked by the people that are like, this was the line in the sand.
Yeah.
Because that, I don't know, that just, I'm like, we saw so much stuff this year that didn't make any logical sense that we celebrated. So why is this the line in the sand? And then that makes me feel, it just does. It makes me feel like a lot of it is men gatekeeping what they believe men can do and women can't do. And I maybe I'm wrong, but I know I'm not.
Love that.
That's how I feel. I mean, I even was talking to Adam and I'm like, do people have the right to be suspicious? Of course they do. Do we know what happened with shoe technology? We have no idea. We have no measurements, no real research. We do not know. And I was like, but can the media be? And he goes, sexist. And I was like, that's why I married you. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm glad we had this conversation, because I do feel like initial texts response, I was like, I don't know if we're going to see eye to eye on this. I think we might be a little too far apart.
Yeah. Well, I can be harsh. Like I read my list of why I feel like you have the right to be skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm actually glad we waited too, because I think I would have been I definitely would have been skeptical, but I also would have been wanting to talk about shoe tech and how that's like just it's not the same fucking sport. But I think I wouldn't have reading all the media really ignited in me like this moment of what the hell? What barriers do women get to break that gets to be celebrated? Like, when do we get our, when someone runs, I was running with my friend Trevor yesterday, who's a runner, not a nerd, not nerded out on it like I am, just like loosely follows it. And he was like, when a man runs under 2 minutes in the marathon, it will be front page news across the world.
100%.
And
right.
So I'm like,
this is the equivalent. This is the equivalent. And look, like it's not like if you put all of those things together for the sub 2 attempt, and like the only difference that the one thing they couldn't get approved for the one he did go under 2, I believe, is the pacers, right? Like they did all the things like, okay, we want this to be a world record, but we can't get the pacer scenario to fit with World Athletics rules. Well, Chepngetich had the pacer the whole way, and that's the only difference.
Right. And I think if we want, that's again, like there's all these other conversations we can be having. If you want to have a conversation about pacers, I mean, that's a whole nother podcast. Every woman in that race had her own set of pacers. What are we doing? Are we racing? Or are we running with our training partners? You know, so like that's a whole nother conversation we can have, but that matters. That's how he broke 2 hours. That was a big piece of the puzzle, right? They had men coming in and out, like they leave the V formation, come back in, because no man could run at the point that time anyway. No man could run under 2 hours all by themselves. So you have to have pacers coming in and out, which isn't allowed in the rules. So that's why it couldn't be verified as the official world record.
And drug testing.
But women can have that, right? And so what if you do? You have this person the whole way helping you. You still have to do the work, but we know it helps. That's how we see world records on the track. You don't see a world record on the track when people are just racing head to head. You see it when there's a rabbit that pulls you out, that gives you some reprieve, takes you as far as they can, and then they drop off and step to the side, and then you have to take over. But hopefully at that point, you're 2/3 of the way down, and now you just need to like really focus in and look at the lights or whatever, right?
Well, there's no doubt that technology is factoring. We have to take our mushrooms, but I think let's talk about the future. Let's talk about one. I want to bring in TCS because they're doing this really cool thing with technology that I'm working with them on, and it's this future athlete project where they've made a digital twin of my heart, and they had like a little hologram thing last year, but now like they're actually taking data and like applying it to the heart, so they're showing its improvement through training, and like these sort of things are going to impact the future of running. So I have all these learnings from my heart, but like, I mean, how is that stuff going to change the future of training? You know, do
It
you think
will.
we're at a threshold, or like, what do you think? I mean, where does this thing go?
I mean, if just where your plate is placed in your shoe can blow up the sport this way, of course, looking at your heart, what workouts and what type phases of training made it more efficient, what tired it out, what enabled it to recover. Like at some point when we're looking for that 1% or 2%, yeah, that stuff is going to matter. I mean, we're desperate. People prick their finger after every workout. So of course, learning, I
Right.
mean, your heart is your heart. Like if it's not functioning properly and it's not tuned to the max, like good luck, right? Especially as being an endurance athlete. So that research is really interesting to me. And
Yeah.
I want to see your heart. I want to see it pumping.
I know. I've talked to them a few times and I'm like, I don't know, what if it's weird looking? And then it's like at the expo and people are like, "Oh, ugh."
That does
Yours is
not look
kind of
like a
neat.
heart.
But they did we had a call that, a little while back and they were like showing different measurements of like, I guess ventricles or like different parts of the heart that are like bigger or like more there's more strength there because of years and years of endurance training. So they're actually mapping that out and then they have another athlete who I don't want to get in trouble, but she's a normie as we say. And my heart,
What an elitist.
80% of the energy I generate moves blood through my organs and musculoskeletal system compared to 50% for the average person. So, like, you can see my training, not
Yeah.
just my genetics, probably as well, but my training and how it impacts. But I think that stuff's fascinating and it's going to apply to, like we start here and then all of a sudden it becomes available to everyone. And
Yeah.
then you see more improvements. So, if, sub 210 cracked your mind, just wait until we have a map of your body and we're like, oh, that workout doesn't work, do this instead, and this is the gain you're going to see, and boom, whole new world, right?
Yeah. Whole new world.
And on top of that, there's just health and wellness.
Right. I mean, everybody can benefit from finding out what improves your health, your heart health, right? Everybody. I mean, whether you're an athlete or not, it's super helpful to know what do I need to do to make sure my heart is as healthy as possible. I
you
mean,
also you also have to wonder how that, or if that could factor into anti-doping.
hmm,
Like, can we see, stuff that doesn't make sense in terms of growth and changes, and like this is a sign that this was done synthetically. I mean, just thinking out loud.
yeah,
It's
that's
not,
super interesting.
so tech
Now you
tech
have to
does
have your
solves a
heart scanned,
lot of problems. Yeah,
heart
right.
scanning while you gave your blood.
Yeah.
What do you think? How quickly do you think we'll see another sub 210?
I mean, we've heard a number of coaches be like, "Oh, my athlete's in 212 shape. My athlete's in 212 shape." I don't think they've plateaued. They just haven't gotten on the fast course yet, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
in even like seeing Hassan finish in Paris, which everyone was like, that was like a crazy hard course. How fast did they run? They ran fast, right?
222.
So like really fast for that course. And like, dude, that kick was a track kick.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't toast. So I think it'll be I mean the 211 lasted a year.
Yeah.
And I think again, like it's the Bannister effect. And I think even Chepngetich's splits, like she can be more efficient in how she runs that. I
Yep.
mean,
She goes out 30 seconds slower through
yeah,
the half, right?
she can positive split. She's showed that, but like, can she be more efficient? Probably.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you get the right weather. I would love to see competition, like three women just hammering each other at 210 pace. So I don't know. It'll be sooner than we think, I think.
I agree. I don't think it'll, I think we'll be seeing people attempt it. Safan Hassan is one of the most competitive people on the planet. You don't think she saw that and said, I can do that?
Yeah. Well, and
So,
it's a Sefa said
mhm.
she sent a little congratulations I'll be looking to get that back ASAP.
Yeah, exactly.
She's not like, oh no,
Yeah.
too much.
Yep. I agree. All right. Well, we survived it.
Okay.
We did good.
Well,
We did
yeah,
good.
we survived this part. It's the comments that get ya.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Bring it. I
Yeah.
just think it's like important to talk about this stuff. And I think one of the things that the positive feedback from the Boston conversation was that these conversations are hard to have, but they are important. And I just feel like I knew we were going to talk about it. I'm glad we waited because it's not like it changed my mind on anything, but it offered me like a glimpse that I didn't even realize I was seeing all the time.
Yeah.
I like opened my eyes like, oh shit, like this is actually a pattern.
That's
And
annoying.
So I'm glad, yeah. And then that became the thing I was more mad about than anything. So I'm glad that we waited and took a beat and kind of let it settle down. And yeah, let us know. I'm sure some of you will hate us and some of you will love us. And that's
Look,
fine.
I'm also totally fine being completely wrong. Like maybe she's just juiced to the gills and like she's going to test positive and they're like, we didn't even have to take this to the lab. It cracked the case because it was so toxic. I don't know. I'm happy. Like if that happens, I'll say, hey, what an idiot. What a dumb conversation.
We'll be like, okay, phew.
Yeah.
Now you guys are fine. Don't worry. No woman's run sub 210 yet. But it's definitely it's gonna happen. So don't lose your mind so much the second time it happens. Yeah. All right. Should we move on?
I think we should. I think
we
just have a top five. Yeah. I have a cream soda that I opened last night.
I'm gonna open it.
Listen. Put it in the fridge. That sounded refreshing.
I love that.
Oh, now I'm sad of my old one. I need to order new ones.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's do you want to start them off or how you feeling about the top five here?
I have one that is kind of like with our conversation there.
Okay.
I'm just going to give a shout out. Is it Tony Revis? I've known him for years. I just want to pronounce his last name right. So you sent me an article that he wrote and I was so happy to read something balanced about the 20956, where yes, skepticism is welcome and warranted, but also what are we doing here? And we actually don't know what shoes have done, and we actually are acting a little bit crazy. So to Tony, I so appreciated that article. I've been thinking about like reaching out to him and saying thanks, but thanks for sending that to me, Des. And go ahead and read it. Tony Revis, he wrote this article. It's the most balanced thing I have read in the last week, and I appreciated it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I thought it was well done. I think there was a lot of articles that made me want to dig in and find reasons why the person who wrote it was just wrong. And Tony's article, I was like, okay, like, yeah, this hits both sides. I feel comfortable after reading this.
Yeah.
So I agree with that one. Okay, I'm stalling. Okay, I'm gonna give a little shout out to the person who asked the question in Chicago about the Nobody Asked Us 10,000, because we talk about it a lot, but talk is cheap, action's where it's at. And I feel like that gave us a little kick in the butt.
It did.
I mean, I don't know if it's going to spark anything that clicks immediately, but it was like, there's fire under the ass.
Yep.
So thank you.
We're doing some research. We're having some meetings. Yeah. Thanks for reminding us that we said we were going to do something and that we should, follow through on that.
Try and follow through.
Yeah.
Chris.
Chris Garrett.
Can you do it for us?
Yeah. Okay. I often shout out my niece, Sophie Schoolmeister, because she's an awesome athlete in person. But I'm actually going to shout out her sister, her little sister, Molly, who's an 8th grader, who's the same age as my son, who I gave my dolls to. She is now also running. She is like just a crazy good athlete. I mean, you put her in basketball, soccer, anything, she can do it. But she's running cross country this year, and she just ran, I don't remember the time, but it was really, 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 really fast. And the boys and girls ran together, and she got 4th overall. So shout out to my niece, Molly, kicking butt. It's so fun to see them both embrace the sport and crushing it.
It's in the jail cell. Terrible lighting here.
We're going to get so much crap on this YouTube episode because you're going to be cut out the whole time.
Oh, no, I didn't even think about it. But it's like I could be here and just look like I'm in prison. I'm a zebra. You have to go to the YouTube to see me as a zebra. Gosh. I'm going to go with the Glycerin Max. Because I just saw those things and I was like, nope, we've gotten too big, got too
this
soft.
broke the sport. Broke
Broke my brain, broke my back, and I really like them. I was like, second runs only, and then yesterday I was like feeling pretty flat. I didn't want to go out the door. I was like, I'm gonna wear the marshmallows. Sure enough, I had a puffy run. Felt good. So those are treating me well. I really like them. People should try them out. I think in Chicago they had like you could test them, which is perfect. I don't know if they'll have that in New York, but find out, because if you can try them, I think that once you put them on and experience them, you'll see what I'm talking about here. So yeah. I'm going to go with the Glycerin Max.
All right. So for my last one, I'm going to shout out Joel Jagger. Not everybody knows who that is, but if you know steeplechasing in America, you'll know who Evan Jagger is, and it's his dad. And he did the hand cycle race at Chicago, and he got 5th place overall. That is awesome. What an effort. And I'm proud of him. Congrats,
that is
Joel.
Awesome. Well done. Love it.
Okay.
All right. I feel like that's a great place to put a period on things.
Yes, me too. I'm proud of us.
Good job.
We had another nuanced, mature conversation. I dropped a lot of swear words in this one, so sorry, but not sorry.
It's heated. It's a lot. It's a big barrier, and there's a lot of feelings around it. But for now, hat tip to Ruth Chepngetich.
100%. Yep. Barrier breaker. Like what would we say for everyone else? We say groundbreaking performance. So let's just
no human is limited.
No human is limited. That's perfect. See you later.